Makers Row is basically a marketplace that connects entrepreneurs and brands with manufacturers in the U.S. Right? And these are some of the numbers. We launched in 2012. We have 65,000 brands. We have about 5,000 factories. There have been over 1 million products created on Makers Row. Now, those products are not individual SKUs, but just overall products, right? So just keep that in mind so you don't quote me on that later. How have so many products been created, right, on Makers Row? Like, what do we do? Well, we provide a search functionality. So let's say you want to find a manufacturer to, let's say, create a pattern for a sick handbag that you want to make. Well, we have those on the site. Let's say you want to find someone that can mass produce a design that you already have in place. Well, we have factories that do production as well. So you can search there and find that. We have really in-depth profiles about everything that factories provide. So we bring up to the front all the capabilities up there at the top, and also a whole bunch of pictures and videos that they may have. So we're all about making manufacturing decisions very, very simple and easy. And we also have this notion of projects, which is really, really awesome, which we did like maybe like 2 years ago. So you can create a project about what you want to do, what you need help with, send it to a factory, and they'll tell you if they can help you or not with it, all via message. And we also complete the cycle with payments, which is definitely clutch. But that's now. Back in 2012, it wasn't like that at all, right? 2012, we were just building. It was literally a Cambrian explosion of features, right? Boom, yeah, just like that. So for us, it was product, right? And it didn't take as long as 65 million years or whatever the number is. We did it a lot faster than that. So we were just churning things out left and right. So this was the motto: ship, ship, ship. That's it. So we built all these things like profiles, media galleries, catalog, reference samples, reviews. Like, it was a lot of stuff. We're trying to establish this product market fit. I'm sure anyone that's involved in tech, you've heard this before, or even with your business, you have heard product market fit. It's like a big thing. So what we're trying to do is play around with things and see what sticks. And whatever sticks is what we roll with. So we ended up coming up with these 3 main features: search, profile, and messages, right? And our strategy for this whole thing was we planned, right? We executed, tested, and then iterate. I just gotta say that one more time because it's so important. Plan, execute, test, I like it, and iterate. Yeah, that's right. So things that we learned through this whole process, because building startups is fun, but it's not easy, is that time is not on your side. I know I mentioned this to John on the way over here. You gotta build fast, ship often, release first, optimize last, and if it doesn't work, just scrap it, and just keep moving. And that's really the way that we got to the point where we are today. Thanks. And you can check out Makers Row after this event. Come find me. I'll tell you more about it. I'll wear out your ear and all that.
Hello, folks. My name is Dwayne Johnson, not to be confused with The Rock, even though it's spelled the same way. And I tell you, people hear my name and say, I know that name from somewhere. I say, I'm not him. But what I am is a partner at Scale Up Partners. We're a small consultancy that works nationally on what we call inclusive competitiveness. And inclusive competitiveness is really about engaging the entire population in the economic benefits of that region or city. So how do you get more folks and more diverse folks involved in the money-making, wealth-creating aspects of their community? So we have multiple ways that we do that. And I can tell you one that I'm working on right now in Oregon, which is creating what we're calling a smart goods consortium. So, and we'll talk a little more about that when we get into the manufacturing 4.0, but what smart goods are really the evolution of your everyday product and service into something that has intelligence, that has communications capability, and that can interact with the cloud, and then have analytics, can have it make autonomous or semi-autonomous decisions itself. So what that means is the smartphone in your pocket, that's a smart good, but you might have a water bottle that's a smart good that can actually tell how full it is, how fast you've been drinking it, what the ambient temperature that Dwayne seems to like is, and will tell me that there's another bottle in the back room that's ready for me when I'm done. All those sorts of things become possible. The idea that we're working on in Oregon is one where we are looking at creating an infrastructure in our community that ties the education to the local production, tying it to the products that are being developed, that are strategically advantageous for us. And what that means is, since we are in Oregon, we do a lot of wood products. We do a lot of outdoor wear. We are the home of Nike, so we do a lot of shoes and apparel around that. How do we get more people involved in creating the next generation of products? How do we actually build manufacturing plants in our community that allow multiple people to really have access to those? Okay, so people may think that you need to be an engineer or a designer to participate in some of these industries. We're trying to break the myths down around that, recognizing that you can be an accountant, you can be a technologist, you can be a runner. Like all of these people are necessary in the product and development mix. And when you bring those folks together, they can create new products and new services that can then go to market and then help be successful. One of our biggest challenges is really around education. How do you build the education infrastructure that allows people to see what's possible? One of the problems that we see in more diverse communities is that we don't even know what's going on from an economic development perspective in our communities. And if you don't know what's going on, it's really hard to plug into those opportunities and find out how to do well. So part of what we do with Scale Up, and my two partners, Jonathan Holyfield and Michael Green, are great at the presentation of this, is really change the narrative about what's possible. Allow people to see themselves running those companies, see them actually being wealthy and being successful, and seeing that around them and recognizing it's not just something that's for a small group of people in the world. So what I love to talk about when we get into this panel is how do we do that? How do we allow those opportunities to show up in every community? Because it's really about community-based economic development. And as a tech person, it's been easier for me to see those opportunities because Industry 4.0 and the Internet of Things is really applying that information technology and development to just about everything. So there's really a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity that's right there on our doorstep. Let's figure out how to actually allow more people to share that.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick off this Manufacturing 4.0 panel. And my question is for the panelists, we can start with Raphael and then we can move on down. My question for you is that David Ricardo was a famous economist, and he said that the basis of economic development was property. And we found that to be true even when it moved over to manufacturing, because you had to scale up, whether it's wide or scale up vertically with the property. And we see that even with computers today. It's based on bandwidth, it's based on server space, the server warehouses that you have throughout the entire world. So how can we get back in our communities? How can we utilize how can we bring back the physical manufacturing to our communities? And how can we build up our, I guess, the employment base? Because that's the basis of a middle class, is a working class. So how do you see small-scale manufacturing coming back over from China and wherever else in the world and coming back to the United States? We know Marcus Roy is doing that. We know, we just said that your organization is doing that over in Portland as well. So please elaborate on that.
Yeah, so what we're doing at Makers Row to solve this problem is we're educating a lot of the brands that are on our site. We have a lot of entrepreneurs that are new to this field, and they think that they can go from zero to just production, right? And it doesn't happen that way. There's all these little steps you have to take to get to that. There's first you have to create a pattern. You have to get samples. You have to, take those baby steps first. So what we try to do is educate is the main thing, because there's this misconception that you can just get started, find a factory, and get it done. And I think that's attributed to lack of education is one, and the second part is thinking that you can go on Alibaba and just get like some ready-to-wear thing and just get it done that way. So we're basically taking the education route towards that, and by education I mean we're blogging a lot, producing a lot of content, having events, and like building community that way. We throw a lot of events so we can educate people. We have panels where we have industry leaders come and just talk to our brands about how to make products, and through that it just funnels business back to the US. I on the way here actually spoke to people about this, where we basically try to funnel economic activity and leads to sectors. We can't do anything to like help them in terms of government regulations, but what we can do is, hey, if you're a city, give us all of your factories that you have, and we'll put them on our site so we can funnel leads that way, and hopefully it turns into actual revenue and actual dollars coming into that community. And that's sort of like the strategy we're taking, and it's been working. We've seen it work in Newark, which we have a big initiative for. We actually have a page. If you go to makersrow.com/Newark, you'll see it's a whole bunch of Newark factories there, and it's been very big. I think Cory Booker was like very instrumental in helping us set that up and get that moving. So that was like a step in the right direction. That's what we're doing at Makers Row for that.
Well, I'm going to attack that question from a number of different perspectives. So as a historian, I look at what has happened in the past. And if you look at what happened in the Industrial Revolution, you recognize that the Industrial Revolution really changed the amount of production that a labor force was able to make. In other words, you used to have a plantation full of people that are working to produce a crop. Well, what happens when you automate that? What happens when you actually create the factories? Well, you find that the same people can produce 10 times as much as they used to be able to produce. What you also find is that the need for the number of people may go down if you don't need the higher levels of production. Okay, so let's fast forward to now where we're talking about Industry 4.0. You're talking about 100-fold increase in productivity. Okay, so if you're looking at and I'll use a good example of a tree farm in Oregon that used to employ 150 people through mechanized process to essentially grow the trees, cut them down, process them, okay? It went from hundreds to 5 people, okay, 5 people. And now if you look at how they run that factory, it looks like a mission control. There's a person sitting in front of probably about 7 different screens, and they can tell you how many drops of water that have been used in that facility. They can tell you what time the plants actually grow more during the day. They can tell you the pH of the soil. They can tell you all these different things about what's going on in that field where you wouldn't have known that before. So if you think about what the value is in that system, the person that owns the land where those trees are getting grown is actually still going to get paid. Okay, now if you're a laborer on that farm, well, if you're one of the people that actually understands how those machines work, you will still get paid. But if you're a person that actually was cutting down trees, there may not be as much of a job for you. You might have to go somewhere else. Well, so multiply that out by, hundreds of different industries that are going to be looking to do the exact same thing. So you start asking yourself the question, where should you be spending your time if you actually want to get in on that, cash in on that opportunity? Well, one of them is to, as you say, own the property. Number 2, understand the knowledge that's necessary to extract the wealth out of that property. Okay, so are you building the machines? Are you running the machines? Are you designing those machines? Are you in the distribution of those products and services that are coming off of that farm in this particular case? And if you are, then there's an opportunity for you to get paid as well. But you might also recognize that the whole concept of job may change over the next 100 years, and it may change even faster than that. It really becomes, can you find the work that's going to be valuable that can actually be converted into dollars that go in your pocket? And it may not mean going to work, 8 hours a day, 12 hours a day. It may be that you spend 8 hours a week doing a particular thing and you get paid for that, right? So I would suggest that part of it really means thinking about the nature of work a little differently. It might be that you might have a robot that does some work for you that you actually design and program yourself, or at least you add functionality to, so that instead of you physically going to a plant, you have the robot that you actually design that has specific skills that no other robot has that goes in the factory and does the work for you. Okay, so they will pay that robot to do that work because it's doing it more effectively than somebody else's robot, or even more effectively than a human being might. Okay, so these are some things that you might want to think about. And then there's a whole transformation that will be happening inside of the factories where it might not be a place that most people will want to be because let's just say that the machines can work under a lot more stressful and precarious positions than a human being would ever want to.
I think that's actually a pretty good point that you brought up, because someone actually told me that, it was a great comment, they said that in the future, you're either going to be told what to do by a computer or you're going to be programming the computer, and you have to sort of figure out on which side you're going to be on. Terminator 2 stuff, right?
So let's talk about small scale manufacturing. I know this is a big deal in New York, batch production, on the continent of Africa, from wood carving. Portland, Oregon is real huge over there. I forget the name of the company that does the engraved wood cases, how they scaled up. So how do you see positioning yourself for growth and getting those strategic partnerships to take advantage of the high demand that if your product is worthwhile, people purchasing that? How do you take advantage of that?
Well, I'd say the watchword for small businesses is network, okay, and network and working together. I think the advantage that you'll see with small businesses and growing businesses is that they can adapt in ways that that you find larger companies don't, and being able to aggregate the resources and the capabilities of any of those smaller organizations allows them to adapt and customize products and then be able to deliver them into a larger market. And that will not only allow them to be successful, but it will allow them to adapt to the changes that are coming in the future a lot easier than larger companies will be able to. So it's really being able to, whether it's sharing information, data, processes, or at least making your processes able to be interfaced with other people's processes really easily, so that you work as a group and collectively, as opposed to just as one individual company.
I think that goes very much in line with startups in general. They're able to sort of innovate a lot faster and quicker, and to a degree that's basically unseen in like a lot of bigger companies. If you go back to the stories of Microsoft, being so dominant and sort of falling off, and then sort of getting back on the horse now. I think we've seen stories now where, like Apple with the iPad, sales are falling off now, and there's concerns, or I guess questions, that can they innovate anymore? But it doesn't really go about that. It's about being able to sort of push the needle is really what it is. And being a small company, you can push the needle a lot faster. Some of it has to do with sort of taking the risk, because if you don't take the risk and push the needle forward, then you're sort of flatline, and you don't want to flatline. You want to be able to sort of grow and keep moving forward and keep innovating. But that's sort of less bureaucracy in smaller companies. Sort of equates to that. That's one of the things I always reason with that. Less bureaucracy. The less bureaucracy there is, the faster you can move and the more things you can get done. That's been my experience, at least.
Dwayne, you were speaking earlier in your introduction about all the programs that you have going on in Portland. Could you elaborate on those? And Raphael, could you discuss the relationships that Tanya said that you all were building a lot of relationships with those people in New York, the manufacturers in New York. So if you could elaborate a little bit more on that after Dwayne.
Okay, great. Well, I'll give one example. We have a thing called I'm the executive director of the Center for Inclusive Innovation at the Technology Association of Oregon Foundation. And we have a concept called the Innovation Academy. The whole idea behind the Innovation Academy is to give students, and this is mostly K-12, an opportunity to do what we call design hands-on learning. So what we do is we go into community and let them come up with an idea and a problem they would like to solve. And then we apply design thinking to that problem, and we have mentors that work with them to help them design a solution for that problem. Okay, so it makes it something that's totally relevant, something that they understand. They may not understand how to apply technology and engineering to it, but that's what we bring. And the idea is that once they've developed that themselves, they have the understanding that they are capable of doing it, and then we plug that into other opportunities in our community. So that's one thing. I'll give one other example, which is I actually sit on the Oregon STEM Investment Council, and what that is really about trying to create a set of pathways for the entire community to take advantage of these 21st century jobs that are available in our community. Intel has a large a facility in Oregon. Is one of their largest in the world, and most of the diversity that's being created in that is being imported from outside of Oregon. So we get to see all these people coming in from other places, and we don't really have a good way for our own students locally to participate. So how do we build an infrastructure that allows that to happen? So it has to go as far back into the education system as we possibly can, and be able to recognize, number one, there is this large company in our community that's doing all this great work, recognizing it's there and recognizing the skills that they're looking for. Number two, making sure that the opportunities are showing up in the entire population of the community as opposed to just the ones right outside of where Intel is. So a good example is in the greater Portland area, the west side is where Intel is. And the west side is where they typically spend a lot of their money. The east side is where the people of color are and where the immigrants are. And while it's 20 miles away, it may as well be on another planet, because the resources just don't get over there unless there are people that are actually actively coming in and saying, well, let's figure out how to make that work. And it's not like they're adverse to doing that work. It's just that they say that they don't know how to, and they're looking for somebody or somebodies to come and help them with that. So we're there to help them with that. So the idea is in the next 5 years, next 5 to 10 years, we'd really like to have those pathways coming out of every community in Oregon, where you could be in the farthest reaches of the state and still have access to the opportunities that are going on in that Hillsborough plant, maybe even in your own community, because when it gets right down to regional activities, they can apply the knowledge that Intel might have in the eastern part of the state to agricultural situations that Intel may have never thought about themselves. So everybody gets a win there.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely spot on. In New York, we're actually focusing on teaching, like just exposing technology to high school students. I'm a volunteer as a mentor at this program called Brooklyn on Tech. And what we do is there's a lot of students, like some students go to P-Tech, this other high school. P-Tech is actually a very technical college, not a college, very technical high school that has embraced technology in Brooklyn. So they actually held a hackathon there, like the first ever hackathon, like overnight, which is unheard of at a high school because, there was all of the logistics involved with like parents and guardians, that sort of stuff. You can imagine at high school, it's crazy. And they even had metal detectors there and all that. So, I was there and it actually built some cool stuff, and when you expose high school students to technology in general, there's this notion that STEM fields end up leading to lab coats and like labs, and that's not true. There's so many different things you can do in tech. It's not just that. You can do marketing, you can do business development, you can do partnerships, you can do sales. You don't have to just code. There's so much more stuff you can do. So as long as you start early, I feel like that's the way to sort of make the difference, right? Early as possible. But yeah, that's that. I just wanted to shout that out.
I'd like to add one thing to that, and to your point, I mean, the idea that you must be a particular type of person to do this STEM stuff. One of our state representatives, Representative Bonamici, had a programming contest, and basically anybody could have joined into this contest, and well, it turned out that not a lot of people of color participated. But she actually went out to one of the schools on the west side that won the contest, and I went with her to give the award. So we walk into this room, and as we walk towards the room, the school is very diverse. I mean, you could see just about every type of person in any different type of community that you expect to see in a diverse school. We walk into the classroom, and there are 40 people in the class. I think 90% of them were white males. There were a handful of Asian and Indians and 2 girls. Okay, so she asks, what do you think the first thing we noticed in this classroom was? And a bunch of the guys put their hands up. He says that we're using PCs. And the girls raised their hand and said, like, there are only 2 of us. And she says, right on. And I said, and of course, I recognize that there's not a whole lot of diversity here. And we asked, why is that? And, the guys were totally perplexed. They had no clue. And the girl says, it's so much of a culture change for us to be in this room because we don't speak the same language you guys do. Okay, and how do you allow people to see themselves in that technology, in those applications, when every time you look, the people all look the same way and they act the same way, and that's the perception of what STEM and tech is. So I mean, one of my good friends, she started a cosmetics company. She is a African American biologist, okay, with an MBA. Okay, so I mean, I love the picture of her. On one hand, you see her in a lab coat doing all this great stuff. On the other hand, you see her like decked out. Okay, and like this is the same person. So, can we actually change the perception that people have about what's possible with STEM? Okay, even if you want to do more of the scientific type work, there's so many different applications that are, a lot more than just sitting in a room with a lab coat on, doing what might look like really boring things. So I'd say that that opportunity. There's something we should share with more people.
All right, we're going to open it up to question and answers.
Raphael, it seems like, I applaud the process that you guys have started. I guess my question is, China is such a force in basically copying every single thing that any innovation that comes here, starts here, they copy it and bootleg it. How are you guys fighting that and bringing the stuff back to the United States? I mean, how is that being done?
That is a very good question, because we are basically riding the wave of Made in USA. It's a huge movement right now. So if you take a look at a lot of products that are being made, a lot of brands want to put on that Made in USA logo, because there's a sense of pride to that. This product that I'm wearing was made here, right? So that's sort of taking care of itself. The counter to that is, let's say you're a brand and you go overseas, right? What draws you to that? What draws you to that is the price point. It's really cheap to manufacture things overseas, but there's also risk associated with that. So let's say you get back an order and you just spend 50 grand, which, by the way, if you guys are here Saturday, Matthew Burnett, one of the co-founders of Makers Row and the CEO, he'll be here on Saturday. He actually did this. He spent about 30 grand on an order overseas, and half of them were not good, of his wallets that he were making. The quality was not up to par. So he had to spend more money to get it made. So he ended up basically finding a manufacturer that was local in Queens and just worked locally, because he controlled the quality a lot better than he could overseas, right? You have to deal with customs, possibly late deliveries, and that sort of stuff. So there's basically an inherent benefit to just working local. You can control quality, you get things faster, and if things don't work out, you can sort of try someone else. So there's this whole movement of people trying to get things made in the USA. So we're basically facilitating that. So we don't look at China like, direct competition, because some people that are on our site are looking for US manufacturers. So that's what we provide, and the brands that we're working with want US manufacturers.
One of the other challenges is that it is all about price and quality. And you have to recognize that if you look back in the past, Japan was in exactly the same situation. Okay, I mean, people used to laugh at Japanese products. But over a couple of decades, their products actually became not only good, but actually better than ours. So you have to recognize that there's an opportunity for them to evolve just as well as other countries can. But you also recognize that the cost for them is going to go up too. So you're already seeing strikes hit in China where the workers are recognizing they're being exploited, and they're getting tired of that. So what happens when their price of labor goes up? Well, the price of their products go up, which means that it might be cheaper for us to actually make it over here in the United States than it might be to take the risk of sending it over there, having it shipped back over here, and then being sold. So what you're seeing more of is assembly that's happening here, okay, where you might actually have some parts that are made in another country, and they'll ship those parts here, but the majority of the assembly and construction of those parts, like a car, for example, may be done here in the United States. So they could still say it was made in America, but some of the parts may have been made somewhere else.
Hi, I'm Carlos Martinez. I'm visiting from Boston, so as you can imagine, I'm really, really happy to be here in Miami because Boston has had 100 inches of snow in 30 days, and it's just great to be here. And I've been attending all of the events, and it's really been fantastic, and thank you for this. So I just wanted to add a little bit to this issue of manufacturing, because it's something that I've looked at in the past. And in addition to quality, speed, cost, I think there's something else that are really basic that make this possible to happen here. And one of them is very high design content and craftsmanship and customization. So when you combine those three things with quality and speed, you can really compete with anybody, right? And that can happen, that happens locally, and I think what you're describing is exactly that. These local clusters of high quality, high speed, but also high craftsmanship, high design content that that mass production just cannot compare to. And there is this big, and this can lead to big companies. There is a company in Fall River, Massachusetts, old textile town, has been there for 100 years. It's called Matuk. George Matuk is the CEO, great guy, one of my favorite people. He took the company from his family, and they make really high-end linens. What you were describing is exactly what they do. They make some of the materials elsewhere, source them from all over the world, but then they assemble and they add the customization and craftsmanship locally, and that radically increases the value. They sell them for high price and have very high profit margins. So this is a key for, I mean, I love this issue of manufacturing and craftsmanship. And when we think about these around the same spectrum, I think it's just a great opportunity.
I think you definitely hit it on the head with that comment, because we have factories on Makers Row that the quality of the things they produce and the creativity that they just demonstrate is out of this world. There's one, the pattern makers, right? They churn out such good content, and they have really good branding too. Like, you can Google them, stuff will pop up. And their Makers Row profile is going to be number 2 as well. They're using our site as their main point of exposure on the web. There's also Janelle Accessories. This is a factory in Brooklyn, and she's like 68, I think. She looks really good for her age. I'm just guessing 68. But she makes these great ties, like really great ties, and she gets a really elaborate designs, and they're always perfect. She gets so many repeat customers back. It's funny, she worked with one designer the other day, and that designer was like, wow, this quality of this thing is fantastic. But she had already worked with him in the past, but he never knew that because he was working with the middleman, right? So now on Makers Row, gets direct access to them, and now he knows who it is. He doesn't know, she doesn't expose these things, but now he knows that where to get these products. So there's a lot of factories that are on Makers Row and all over the country in general that have really, really high quality. They make things that are of high quality, essentially. And that's like the value add, right, of also staying in the US. You can customize it as much as you want. If you have a really elaborate embroidery or some really fancy design that you want to get done, they will work with you, and you can actually meet with this factory to meet those levels of quality and perfection that you want. So it's really as perfect as you want it to be, based on your levels, and you can get that getting things made in the US.
We have a question here in the back.
Let me comment. Dwayne has a comment.
Oh, sorry. Just one quick thing, and that is one of the biggest values that tends to be overlooked on bringing things back on shore is the value of putting your hands on the work. I mean, we can do computerized design all day long, but when you're actually doing what we call the second and third iteration of that product or service, you learn a lot in that process. And we've been outsourcing a lot of that, which is why we've been getting our clocks cleaned by people in other countries, because they'd see the different applications of the work that we'd never see. So when we bring it back here and we have our smaller companies and our craftspeople working on them, they learn in that process, whether it's adding new materials to the product or coming up with whole new ways to develop it. We get to learn that here. And we get to actually teach people the skills around that as well. So and that doesn't get exported as easily.
I would say one thing is that, again, I would have to reiterate the quality, because we bought a $10,000 popsicle machine from China, and we used it for 3 months. The insides began to rust, and then the compressor went out, and nobody knew how to fix that. So we had to send that popsicle machine, if we wanted to, we would have to send that popsicle machine all the way back to China just to get it fixed. So the local manufacturing is a big part of my mindset. So, you said you had a question in the back?
My name is Jason. I've been doing, I'm sorry, like we're in class. All right. So I've been doing IT consulting for like 10 years, and I have some questions or responses to some stuff you said earlier. So in terms of breaking down barriers, and I heard that you had like some high school programs and Brooklyn Tech, I think I heard, and then some initiatives in Portland. But having volunteered and done some things like that in the past, how do you feel as though you combat like socioeconomic issues and like the fact that when the kid is in kindergarten, like if they don't have a good home situation and the education system is messed up, like how do you get in early to really allow, once you get to high school, like because at that point really it's too late. So what are your ideas on combating that? As well as the logging example, I think there were like 100 employees and you brought it down to 5. So for those 95 people that are out of work, I don't know if you've seen the movie Air Up There, or Up in the Air, George Clooney, right? So his job was to go on, it's called strategy consulting, right? You go on make the process efficient, and usually equals people getting fired, right? So what do you do to let people know, you know, how to get retrained? Like, is that your responsibility, or do you advise your clients how to repurpose those people? And then the other thing, this is kind of a general question, how do you deal with the glass ceiling issue as Black people? And I know you're working for yourselves and entrepreneurs, but you're still selling to the 1% at a certain point. So how do you get past those barriers?
Well, you got a lot of simple questions there. Well, okay, so I'll start with the first one, which is how do you get, well, let's put it this way. I actually was on the board of I Have a Dream Foundation in Oregon, and we addressed the issue of how do you allow children to be prepared to go to school. So I'll give a good example of what my New York experience when I first went to first grade. So my first grade experience is me and my friends are walking to school, and about halfway there, 3 guys step to us and say, "Where's your lunch money?" Okay, so we had none, and they kicked the crap out of us and said, "You'll have some for us tomorrow." So we went through that for a few days until one of my friends had a high school brother who came over with his friends and kicked the crap out of them, and he said, "You want some of that? Come back tomorrow." So we had to get to school before we could even start to think about learning. So what happens to the kids that actually don't have a big brother or a friend or somebody that literally live in terror in that classroom about going outside? Okay, you think they're thinking about their math problems? Probably not. If the person is hungry, probably not thinking about class. Okay, so here are all these social issues that have to be addressed before you can even think about doing well in school. You know, is the person eating a nutritious meal? Is there transportation to be able to get to the school? Okay, we have people that for $10 a month they would have to, if their rent went up $10, they had to move, and they'd move out of the school district, which means now that program, that STEM program that was available in that one school is not available in your new school. Okay, so you know, part of that's really a community conversation. How do we address the living conditions and the environment of the community at the same time where we're actually addressing those education opportunities and challenges? So it's really a community conversation.
Just to add to that, there was a story that was all over like TechCrunch and like Pando Daily about this software engineer. He was a white software engineer, and he met a homeless African American person in the park, right? And he taught him to code, and people were just wondering, like, you just taught him to code and left him in the street? Why not bring him into your home and give him shelter, so that way at least he didn't have to think about, you know, food, think about housing. You know, it's gonna get cold, but instead you give him books, you're gonna give him classes, and it caused like this whole uproar. But at the end of it, and it ended up with I forgot the guy's name, but he learned to code. You know, he ended up getting a job somewhere, and now, you know, he's no longer homeless. So I think it's a fine balance between, like that saying. You could teach the horse. What is it? Or teach a man to no. Teach a man to fish.
Horse.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, right. There's that saying. Right. Exactly. So it's about exactly. Yeah. it's about teaching the skills, right? It's better to teach the skills than it is, but it's a trade-off. Sometimes you have to show some sort of compassion and make things easy. It's hard decision, but it ended up working for that person in particular. But it's always good to see more of that, more of those examples like that. But to go back to the question that you had regarding like how early do you go, it's interesting because how early do you go, right? High school makes sense because it's like everyone in high school is like early. They're like young adults. It's really what they are. So they know what they're doing. They understand. You can sort of reach them a lot easier, and their attention span isn't like all over the place. Like someone who's 12 or 10 or even 8 years old who may not be so interested in like tech-related things, or they may be, but those are harder to find. So like my experience in general. So my mentee. When I first met her, she still is actually very focused on going into nursing, right? But because of our interactions, she now has been exposed to, hey, there may be some like side classes or courses you could probably take that may be helpful just in case, nursing sort of go sideways, or it's hard for you to find a job in nursing when you graduate, because these things happen. Sometimes you have to evaluate when you're going to college if your degree is going to pay out. Is it worth paying all the money that you pay for tuition? Does that end up working out? These are hard decisions. So anyway, the whole point is that she basically now has been exposed to tech, and she knows there's a lot more out there. You don't have to like take computer science or take computer engineering or anything like that. You can just take some marketing courses, go to like some meetups, just read on what other startups are doing, just stay informed. That's really all it is. And, diversify. Just take as many courses as possible just to broaden your skill set. But I think high school is a good place to start, and then we'll see how like the outcome of that ends up going, and then we can sort of try to get further along and, earlier.
Awesome. We have time for 2 more questions.
I'll make a quick comment on that, and I'm going to pull my phone out. Okay, this thing. Okay, how many of you have kids? Not a whole lot of you. Okay, but today's kids, 3 years old, they can actually manipulate this for probably better than my mother can. Okay, and they get it, and they don't know what technology is. It's just that thing that was on the table that mom and dad seem to do something with that I like to play with. Okay, so there's a level of curiosity that goes along with that. And I think that we actually spend our time beating that out of the kids. By the time they're in 12th grade, they're not interested in that stuff anymore. So I think the earlier the better, and let people explore and learn and engage in multiple ways, and let them pursue it, give them the tools and opportunities to pursue that knowledge. And then when they get older, they'll be actually able to have more chances to decide what they want to do. Otherwise, literally gets to a point where they'll be in high school, and there'll be a whole bunch of options that they're not prepared for, that they don't really understand how to even make those decisions.
And I would have to agree with that. The younger, the more creative. We run a summer program with Miami Gardens, and we teach the kids about entrepreneurship. So we had this one 4th grade girl. We taught her everything about entrepreneurship, marketing, and the last day of the program, they had to bring in the product that they created. So what she did, she bought in her cups because they were making lemonade, and she started selling water out of the water faucet to the kids in the gym that were too lazy to go to the water faucet. So let's go to the next question.
My name is John. I agree with the last couple of comments that you guys made, which is I think we have to get out of the cycle of STEM equals jobs. It's curiosity equals jobs, right? STEM is just a tool to get there. I think that the best technologists didn't get into the field thinking about how much money they were going to make or how many jobs they were going to create. They just love technology. And so I think there's something there that our communities are, I think, to your point, are either missing or kind of overlooking about the value of creativity and curiosity. My question, though, to the panel is about the role, both of you kind of touched on this, which I think Raphael said that bureaucracy equals, kind of stymied innovation. So the lack of bureaucracy is better for tech. and the role that what that actually means for policy and governance. Government equals bureaucracy, and what that means for most initiatives that deal with regulation, overregulation, or whatever. There's a tension between the what government is trying to do and what ends up happening as a result. And I just was wondering what you guys thought about that. You know, how can the government help you guys do what you do better?
You want that? I mean, I can take that one to start with, because I mean, I work in policy a lot. And here's the problem. People forget that they are government. Okay, so the bureaucracy exists because, quite honestly, a lot of people are checked out. Okay, so the way we describe this system is, so let's look at it this way. I think in this session there will be 2,500 new legislative documents that will possibly become law. 2,500. Okay, so we don't typically take things off of the laws. We actually just keep adding things to it, which actually creates a more and more complex system that somebody has to understand. So you talk about the bureaucracy. The people that actually end up implementing those laws are the ones that are actually really good at understanding all those different things that are in statute. So if you ask, well, why do you actually do this process this way? Well, 30 years ago, such and such a thing happened, and when that happened, they passed a law because somebody went down and talked to their legislator, and a bunch of people got mad. They passed a law, and now we have to do it this way. Did anyone ever ask if we still needed that? No, no one asked, okay? And quite honestly, it's not their job to actually ask whether or not we should be doing this. This is just what we do. So if we actually are part of the government, we can actually say that, why don't we actually review some of that? Why don't we actually streamline that process? Why don't we actually develop things that deliver on the promise of what we'd like our government to do for us? So that's really on us. You know, so get your voice out there, talk to your legislator, push for the things that you actually think you want to have, but on the other side of that, look at the things that are already there and ask the question, do we still need these things?
Well, one of the things as that relates to startups is a lot of startups are very loose out there, where they'll just go about and say, you know, let's just do it. Like Airbnb, perfect example. Uber, another example, right? Especially in New York City. New York City has a lot of regulations, like as Dwayne said, was put in place to protect people. You know, whether it be rents, you know, for landlords, and also the TLC for taxis as well. So the TLC is in place to sort of protect like consumers and the riders that are actually there. Well, when a hot startup comes out of nowhere and starts having, you know, your average Joe giving rides left and right, possibly with no insurance that protects the rider, then that rider is at risk if there's a potential like accident, right? And these are some of the things that as consumers we don't take into account because, hey, it's so convenient, right? So I just want to point out that sometimes, like as startups, we have to like sort of slow down and attempt to work with those governments instead of just going about it like about our way and just let's get it done. Let's go, go, go. Because startups are always moving fast, right? Always moving fast. It's like we're always ship. You know, there's this mug that says like "fuck it, ship it," which is really great, right? But we're always just fast. And at the same time, we sort of need to slow down and work with those governments because they're in place to protect the people. You know. We are, like you said, we are the government, right? That's really what it is. We put people in power.
How you guys doing? Just want to say thanks again for coming out today, you know, having this open conversation with us. My main question is based on the economic situation of the country and what it'll be in the next 10, 15, 20 years. I'm a bit of a futurist, and I'm a lot cynical about how the country will develop in the next couple of years due to the advancement of automation, robotic systems, and I think that the income inequality is going to grow even vastly more than it is already. You know, you have 1% of the world population. The top 1% is owning 97% of the world's entire wealth. So I wanted to find out exactly where do you see the changes going to be for the black population, because we always hurt the most. So I wanted to find out within the next 15 to 20 years, how far do you see us going in the technology realm? And as far as, do you ever see us, you know, migrating actually back to Africa and doing businesses over there? Because, I mean, hey, you may be surprised about how badly they really want us to come over there and do business with them. I mean, I do business in Africa personally, so I know firsthand exactly why they want us to go back over there, because they see us, they see like we're just like them, and we have a lot to offer them and them us, because they have limitless amount of resources and they're squandered by people of not of color over there. It's, we need to be using it a lot more than the Europeans and everybody else that's doing it over there. So just wanted to find out your perspective on that. Thank you.
Yeah, that was very, very articulate. I actually like that, because on the way here, I spoke about that. The same thing that you said, investing in African companies, and there's like a lot of innovation going on over there, because they have different needs that anyone coming from the States doesn't really understand those problems, right? So they understand their problems, they're able to deal with them a lot better and innovate in a different way, and a better way for them, right? Because they have different needs, right? So they go mobile first, essentially, is what it is, with a lot of applications that they may have. So it's this whole mobile first ecosystem, where if you want to, request anything, it's already on your phone, because they have no infrastructure, there's not much broadband. I mean, there is, but it's mobile first for everything. But to answer your first question about where we're going to be in the next 20 to 50 years, I really think it's going to be a huge shift of jobs and professions towards like tech-based industries. So just getting familiar with technology in general. And it, like I said, it starts really early. You have to start early. And the earlier we can start and sort of pass it down, and it can start with yourself as well. Like, you get familiar, right? Pass it down to your cousins, your brothers, your sisters, anyone else you may know, and sort of try to influence them to follow that route as well. I think that everyone needs to sort of be role models in their communities and also lead the way for that. Just because you're doing it and you're good doesn't mean you can't, look back to all your friends and your friends' friends and your friends' families and let them know, hey, this actually worked out for me. Why don't you give it a shot and see if it works out for you? And I think that's definitely the path to go in. Definitely tech is where it's going to be. That's just my opinion.
So I'll give a little bit of a different perspective on that. And my question to you is, what would you like it to be? What would you like it to look like? Because I think there are actually two very, very different possibilities. There's one possibility that allows people of color to really look at what I call that $1 trillion redistribution of productivity and figure out a way to own a part of that. Okay, and by owning that, you can actually define what your future looks like. The other is to actually allow the process to continue the way it has now, which is a consolidation of wealth, a consolidation of the production, the means of production, and essentially let's just say that the jobs are going to go away. A lot of them are going to go away. So if we aren't doing something different, that means we're at the bottom of that pyramid, and it ain't really good down there. So socially, economically, we don't do well in that outcome. And I think the challenge is that there's a lot of economic downward pressure that I think that these changes will bring about, and the question is what we as a society will do about that, right? So when it's not just us that are dealing with the loss of jobs and loss of potential income, what do we do? Because let's be honest, the 1%, they don't make their money on jobs. They don't go to work to make their money. So if you think that you're going to get out from under this by going to work and working for somebody else, they're in business to actually put money in their pocket. So your job is a byproduct of them making money. So what happens when the robot or the more efficient person or the better process shows up that allows them to do that without that labor? Well, for them, it's a no-brainer. I mean, I can show you what that spreadsheet looks like. And it looks a lot better when it doesn't have that fluctuation of that labor that's in there asking for more money, which is going to cost the company more money, right? So, I mean, the joke that I typically make with some of the business folk that's not so funny is that you only need 5 people to run these people's company, right? There's one person that's a security guard that's outside. There's one person that's feeding the machine that's actually, making the stuff go through it. There's a technician that understands how the machine works. Right, there's a person that counts the money and the person that's putting it in their pocket. And where does that lead for the rest of us? But the opportunity that's available to folks is that with the the tech changes, the social changes that could come along with that, you can actually become your own productivity engine, so to speak. So understanding more about how to do the design, how to apply technology, how to understand process, and doing it locally, because at the end of the day, as we were saying earlier, you know what your own problems are, and if you have a means of solving them, then why not do it? And then actually essentially reap the value of that yourself. So the more we can actually do of that type of activity in our communities and getting people to really focus on being part of their own solutions, I think that we could do very, very well.
I personally think it's a mindset, and that we have to be stingy with working with people who look like us. Because if you look at the African Leadership Forum that Barack did in D.C., there were more Fortune 500 CEOs in the Capitol for that event than any other presidential event. If you go down the list and look at the international trade and you look at what they're importing, what they're exporting, you see that all countries in Africa are importing textiles. Where's the textile company? So building those relationships with people in your community that look like you, as well as abroad. And the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce is doing a trade commission to South Africa and the Canary Islands. That's going to happen this year, October 16th through the 24th. So if you're interested in that, talk to me afterwards. We're also going to have the ambassador to South Africa come down and speak in June of this year. So that concludes this session. We have a quick break, and then we're going to get started with the next panel, Creativity 4.0.